Hi, everyone. Thank you for dialing into our call on cross-border biotech BD. I'm Watsek, a biotech analyst at Cantor. I'm also joined by my colleague, Eric Schmidt. And today we're very excited to welcome a special guest, Leon Tang. He is the founder of InScienceWeTrust BioAdvisory, which is focused on cross-border BD transactions, particularly between Western pharma and Asian biotech. And Leon himself has closed over $1 billion BD deals. He's also a former sell-sider and a scientist. I'm also a new fan of his newsletter, Asian Biotech, He's Walking to a Bar. As an Asian who doesn't drink, I love the title. I would say if you like to follow Asian Biotech, I would encourage you to take a look. And if you got any questions for Leon during the call, feel free to put in the chat box or email us. So with that, Leon, I would like to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this cross-border BD advisory business.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee and Eric, for giving me this opportunity to share my opinion. That's purely my personal opinion with the investor on call. So a little bit about myself. My name is Leon Tang, born in China. I went to the States like 17, 18 years ago, get a PhD from Icahn School of Medicine, Mount Sinai. Afterwards, went down 30 blocks to Memorial Sloan Kettering for a short period of postdoc. After that, went down more blocks to Wall Street as a analyst for a philanthropic venture fund affiliated to Cancer Research Institute. If you are in immuno-oncology, you probably heard about CRI. I was there for a few years and then went to Midtown to Barclays as sales and analyst associate for a short period of time. After that, I was really convinced that China biotech probably is something worth my time. So I joined China biotech with the name Shanghai Henlius Biotech. Used to be a publicly traded company in Hong Kong. Recently was taken private by their parent, was a majority shareholder, Fosun Pharma. I was there for 2 years, involved in quite a few deals. That's where I kind of built my deal sheet. And after that, about 2.5 years ago, I really feel like, get itchy with my hands. Why not try my hands? Because I really believe the China biotech industry, biopharma industry, moving to the new phase, which is innovative asset development. And in the meantime, also one thing I really learned through my short period of career in this industry is, what I'm doing, BD or investment or advisory, is really about quality relationship. So I'm kind of an engineer by training, want to do things on the scale. In order to do that, I created a nonprofit a few years ago called the ISWT Community. So you changed my company's name, BioAdvisory, to community. It's going to be ISWT Community. That's which publish a newsletter every week. That's where, like Lee mentioned, feel free to subscribe. We do monthly webinar. We also have a large WeChat-based social platform with around 2,000 members. Pretty much all the leading China biotech biopharma have at least one management members in our community. So that's become very handy. That's probably why Lee was a little bit hopefully you were impressed how many people I know from all these major deals that come out of China. That's about myself. Hopefully that's give people a little bit of flavor who I am, where I came from.
Yeah, I was really impressed by your thousands of contacts. So I think it's interesting that last week, I think Atlas Venture has highlighted China as one of the key themes for our industry this year. And I think you mentioned that in your newsletter as well. I think it's really nice to see that Asian biotech is perhaps playing a more prominent role right now. So what would you say are the biggest sort of BD trends that you're seeing this year that are new versus prior years?
I would say if you just focus on the especially headline making deals out of China this year compared to, let's say, until end of 2023, the previous, let's say, 4 or 5 years, I would say 3 things really caught my attention. Number one is, I would say, diversification. Up till end of 2023, majority of the deals really on oncology, right? Especially during the IO, kind of a frenzy period. There are so many PD-1, CAR-T, and CD47, really immuno-oncology came out of China. That's the majority of them, and some small molecules, right? But if you look at this year, two of them still kind of taking the majority of the, I would say, the percentage. Number one, obviously, is still oncology, a lot of ADC. Number two, probably even bigger than number one, is the T-cell engager for autoimmune diseases, right? Then after that, you still have some small molecules. So that's one, definitely they kind of branch out to other disease area. And that's number one. Number two, also like the modalities, right? So in terms of modalities, still heavily focused on biologics. There's a lot of bispecific T-cell engagers, specifically bispecific assay like, VEGF R and PD-1 for oncology. There's some tri-specific, and there's a lot of bispecific ADC. So that's still probably 70-80%. But I also saw there are, let's say, targeted protein degradator. There's a radiopharmaceutical. So, kind of a largely overlap with the trend in the US, right? The global stage. So they used to have some gap until the end of 2023, heavily focused on IO or oncology. But right now it's kind of really more and more kind of similar to what's really going on in the US if you just follow the overall deal flow. So that's I would say that's major difference also. Oh, one more thing, sorry. This is actually really important. If you look at the stage of assay from this year, they get a lot earlier, right? If you say like the big check deal like Profound, and also the Lanova with the Merck, Curon with the Merck, Chemagin with the GSK, they're all phase one. You even have like a Lanova with the Merck. I believe the asset only does 1 or 2 patients by the time they close the deal. This barely happened until the end of 2023. You probably heard before they have the largest deal before, some of the largest deal, like Takeda and Schmidt was a phase 3, already approved in China. Another one's called KBP Biosciences and Novo Nordisk. That's already phase 3. So that was before, but this year, vast majority of them are phase 1, early stage, some of them even preclinical stage.
Okay, so I wanted to dig a little bit into sort of, the driving force behind this seemingly stronger alliance between the Western pharma and Chinese biotech. And I think, Leon, as you mentioned, we've seen numerous M&A deals, strategic collaborations, and newcos. And I think the degree of the BD activity has been a lot more extensive than we've seen previously. You mentioned they were mostly oncology deals, right? So why do you think this is happening right now?
Well, I guess big pharma don't have a great time, right? Let's just be honest. If you look at the recent Lyric partner report, you look at how much revenue loss exclusivity going to be for their market drug. Some of them going to lose up to 70%, right? So that's really, there's a huge demand. That's number one. Number two, I think there's a little bit gap in terms of supply in the US and Europe to refill their pipeline. And so that's really a demand side, right? So they just have this mandatory need to grow their pipeline to keep their growth of their top line in the future. That's from the big pharma side. In the meantime, the biotech, a lot of them in the US public one have the same problem, right? And also VC. And then go to the China side, I think there's several things that really increase the demand. Number one is, there's people called engineering advantage in China, just have a larger number of STEM. If you look at the publication, they say Nature, Cell, and Science, China already passed the US as number one a few years back. And they really focus on which discipline they have the biggest advantage, I would say, is the chemistry and the protein engineering. So, obviously right now, incremental innovation is really trendy, right? Instead of something super different. So that's kind of a play into the China biotech biopharma strength very well. So they do have a lot of assay ready to sell. That's number one. Number two, they have to sell. We were chatting before the call. If you look at the public market and the private market, in terms of capital raising in China, it's just really bad. has not recovered. And before, a lot of companies didn't want to sell their core asset because they want to use that as their valuation to go IPO or raise the next round. But both opportunity kind of largely shut down. And in order to survive, they have to sell their best asset oftentimes, their lead asset. And so that's a second one. Third, I think that also, the mentality change is very important. Before, up till probably 2 years ago, every single biotech in China will tell their investor they want to become biopharma in the future. Everyone here knows that's impossible. How many big pharma we have in the world, right? So, but about like I would say recently they really realized, they have to kind of plug themselves into the global system. And given the current situation, the best value they can get from the system is really provide innovative asset early stage of the time to the US. By doing this, and also they saw a lot of a successful story like Resale, Profound, HBP Biosciences. This is not just idea, it's working, right? So the investor, have a pretty decent return, and the entrepreneur cash out and start a new company. So it looks like they figure out a way, the demands from the US side and the supply from China and the willingness of a China-based investors, entrepreneur to really kind of change their mentality altogether. I think create this kind of a ideal situation.
Leon, just want to go a little deeper into the Chinese capital markets, which, as you noted, have been very, very difficult in terms of their ability to support new companies. What exactly is going on there? Why do you think they have been so difficult in terms of capital fundraising environment? And then two, is the price control environment in the China biopharmaceutical system playing a role in that? Is the lack of a domestic market for biopharmaceuticals one reason why these companies are not able to raise capital there?
Yeah, so first of all, to your first question, why the capital market is so bad? The decoupling is real, right? They started with the capital decoupling. So a lot of US-based VC fund actually either left or kind of really reduced their activity in China, just because this potential risk, geopolitical risk. That's number one. That's why the capital markets are hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still money in China, but the money oftentimes tied to, state-owned property, so like entity or like, kind of a, I would say, industry policy-related fund. So they have a lot of string attached. It's not like a purely market-driven fund, right? So that's make it a little bit difficult for those companies if you take a lot of money from those funds to really kind of do the things according to market rule. That's number one. Number two, the price control is absolutely real. So we typically use the rule of thumb. In China, net price of innovative drug is about 5% of what the net price in the US. I'll give you a number. I think in 2022, the innovative drug market in China is about, I think it's $20 billion US in 2022. Forget about all those like a patient population. That's how much revenue really booked. And McKinsey recent report said that probably by close to 2030, they're going to be around 50 billion. And Eric, very well, that's small. That's like a peanut compared to the US, right? Now you think about all those huge patient population. What does that mean? Your profit margin is really, really bad. You have to sell 4 times more drug, and your revenue is a fraction of what you're going to have in the US. So how can you make money? So that's why those biotech companies realize the biopharma path is pretty much shut down in China. So that's why they are doing this. But I think, yeah, that's just reality.
Okay, so I guess on a more positive note, right? I mean, historically, China biotech is maybe considered less of an innovator and more of a manufacturer or me too follower. And this year we're actually seeing some, success stories, right? I think the biggest one is perhaps, Summit and Kizo's PD-1 VEGF. And we're actually having, Western companies now trying to follow up with their own programs. So I guess the question for you is, well, do you think this is a reflection of the overall quality of R&D in China, or do you think this is more of a one-off situation?
Well, first of all, I personally think it's probably not a one-off. Why is that? Several reasons. Number one, I already mentioned that China probably have the largest number of STEM educated talents. And you probably heard about the word sea turtle, returnee, right? They spent like decades in the US or in Europe and went back to China. So those people have a lot of know-how. And also another thing is China is pretty strong in terms of chemical engineering and protein engineering. Medicinal chemists are pretty good. So that's where, I think fitting, I would say in the future, probably a decade, that still have a huge place for our industry. That's with that. Another thing is why I don't think it is a one-off. What happens, just this year, the China biotech made tens of billions of dollars to BD, M&A, all this kind of stuff, right? To my knowledge, almost all of those entrepreneurs, they didn't retire. They just set up a new company, right? So they are really, really, I would say precious resources and, kind of a real driving force for the continuity of a China biotech biopharma. Now they know how to do this, right? And they are, by training, they are very good drug developers. So then they actually can create a new project more aligned with the global market needs. And also, because they made money, their investor made more money. The investor is not, taking the money home. They're going to reinvest, right? So definitely going to be less money than before, but there are money. So, there are money for those serial entrepreneurs. Another thing people didn't realize, in China, if you think about the developed drug, the cost, and the most 1/3, sometimes the people say 1/4. Right, because of work ethics, we were jokingly, the 996-007, right, and also the PhD in China probably costs 1/10 of PhD in Boston, right? So oftentimes there's a lot of repetitive work. I think that's definitely the money. Everything's lower than before, but I'm personally very optimistic. I think this industry is going to continue.
Now, maybe a little bit on the valuation. I mean, Leon, as you mentioned, if you look at some of the acquisitions this year, we're actually seeing some blockbuster deals. I think Profound is one. So I guess the question here is, well, number one, what do you think about the valuation of these, West-East deals relative to the Western biotech deals? And are they more attractively priced? And number two is, how is the valuation typically determined?
Yeah, so this is actually, we deal maker always talking about how you decided the value of it. Probably Eric know very well since you are on the other side of it. It's really about the market dynamics, right? If you have a single buyer, it's a buyer's market, then in the price, you take or leave it, especially when you're desperate. And if you can create a dynamics, you create a formula, right? Like, we can beat them up, which is a word, probably everyone know this. Now you're gonna have a market price, which is pretty much aligned with the global price, comparable. So I think China biotech, before, they're not very good at this because, oftentimes the founders are scientists. They often their deal, a lot of their deals are their first ever deal with MNC, like a big corporation. So they get on the rough end of it. But over time, they kind of communicate, like I would imagine my community helped them a little bit, right? They share some of the insights. So now, if they have a bidder from US, from Europe, from sometimes Japan together, they really can command the price, right? Because that's just gonna be a normal dynamics of a deal making. On top of that, I think another thing is the China biotech biopharma realize how important to have a professional deal makers. If you say the recent major mega deals, if you look at the fine print, you'll say they were not done by the company themselves, largely. They involve bankers, some of the famous one on Wall Street, or lawyers, right? So that's really helpful as well, because those banker lawyers know, what's the market price of this asset going to be. They know how to create the dynamics. Hopefully, some of them gonna find people like us, right? We probably cannot do those mega deals. Smaller one, but we're happy to help them as well. So we also know the dynamics as a former sales side. We know how to do MPV. We know how to do competitive intelligence. So I would say everything together, getting better and better. But there were some deals I think could have been better. right? Just take a PD-1 VEGF space. Look at all the deals in the past half a year. Some of them you really get you scratch your head. Why they find numbers like this, right? So I'll stop right there.
Okay, so Leon, you've talked with many strategic partners and including, some VC funds as well. I guess we're very curious what types of assets are on top of their shopping list right now.
Especially VC fund, the reason we all know VC fund, when they create a new call with a kind of a clinical stage asset, already have an eye for exit already. So whatever they are buying is something they think in 2 or 3 years, big pharma going to buy, right? So then that's very clear what everyone knows. I guess on the Wall Street on the call today, what a big pharma would be interested in buying in the future. So then they go back to China. If there's something kind of fit in the categories, globally competitive, they will take it. So take some example, right? T-cell engager, you see I don't know, 80% of deals, BD deals, M&A deals this year came out of China. Just because, I read you guys research, I think Josh probably, as one of a pioneer, to cut the initial CAR T data, right? Like B-cell depletion for autoimmune diseases. And the whole industry, a lot of companies, big pharma, are very interested in this, right? So that's why probably that's a good example. Another one is ADC, right? ADC, people realize IO have a very little juice to squeeze out, and they go back to precision chemo. That's how I look at the ADC, right? So that's also no-brainer. That's playing into China's strength. I want to mention they are very good at the medicinal chemistry and the protein engineering, right? I would say they are world-class. So that's also kind of what they are looking at. And then if you're talking about disease area, right, oncology, obviously, immunology, obviously, obesity, right, that's a no-brainer. I remember from like Analyst Venture, Bruce Booth presentation, he said obesity is something you must have. Otherwise, you will not be a big pharma 10 years from now if you don't have one, based on what he said, right? So I guess that's also no-brainer. You say Calera, you say recently Apollo Therapeutics in license FGF21, GLP-1. There's probably one more target for MASH/obesity. So that's what I would say, that's typically aligned with the, what the VC are interested in, pretty much aligned with what the pharma's future shopping list is going to look like, and overlap with what China Biotech are really good at, which is pretty much medicinal chemistry and protein engineering heavy asset.
I think, Leon, we talked about this because I was curious why we haven't seen more radiopharmaceutical deals.
Yeah. Well, you definitely have to think about the supply chain, right? The BIOSECURE Act is real. So actually, we host a webinar. We hosted Gary Lee, who was an executive from RISBio.
Yes,
he talked about for radiopharmaceutical, the process is a product. Now, if you want China Biotech to develop a product for this, they have to split their process between US and China, which would be a nightmare. Right? So many red tapes you have to cross. But of course, you say you can, China Biotech or whoever generates some code material and you conjugate in the US. But I don't know whether, that kind of you have a big pond between the two teams would be very helpful to really leverage their advantage of speed, right, and cost. So that's why. Another thing is, like a radioisotope is a heavily regulated material. I think China right now still today struggle to get some of the most desirable radioisotope on scale. So that also limited what they can do, right? So that's how I look at it. But of course, there's one deal, I believe it's called One Life, founded by Schmidt. They did a deal with a South Korean-based company or something. But in general, they are very interested, but I have not seen deal, probably because of the reason the logistic just doesn't favor them to do this. That's how I view this.
And then, in terms of this new co model, we're seeing more of those. Maybe tell us what this is and why do you think it's gaining a lot of traction right now?
Yeah, so actually our newsletter last Sunday featured one article, gave a really good summary. I would recommend people to read it, but you need a Google Translate, by the way, it's in Chinese, unfortunately. I think this newco solve a few problems. You know, I listened to Eric all your like a PM corner webinar. One thing come back every single one of them. You know, the VC, blue chip VC in the US really value management team more than asset, right? People also like they bet on jockey instead of on the horse. So China Biotech right now can offer really competitive horse, but their jockey, I don't think it is to their flavor, the like of the US investor. So build a new core, you pretty much have a new team, right? New management team. Like, you know, have a new jockey, a team of jockeys to ride on the horses out of China. That's pretty much how I view this. Solve a lot of problems. That's a, you know, funding operation point of view. Another one is about, I already mentioned that a lot of China biotech company, if you look at the cap table, I don't think the investor in the US can like it, right? You don't want them kind of, you know, some investors just don't get along either like, you know, professionally or like legally very well. So by this new corporate, a new entity, you get rid of all those problems as well. And another one last thing is, again, the investor are willing to do this because they saw a successful story. I think Henry really helped this field a lot. You know, Henry initially when they did Alos deal, arguably is not great for them financially, but when they did the deal with the Bain Capital and Alice Venture, RTW was a fantastic deal. That's really model after I was a Cerevel, right? That's very similar to those kind of deals. That really inspired a lot of China biotech company. And also, you know, everyone know what's the Calera's valuation really is. So Henry's 20% equity, you know, shares worth a lot. And that's very helpful. So that's really kind of open people's mind. They saw a great example and the people go after this. So three things, right? So really have a solve the, you know, mismatch, cultural mismatch problem, solve the cap table problem. And also, you know, Henry set a great example. So people just said, you know, why can't I be Henry, next Henry?
One thing I'm very curious about is the due diligence process. I mean, for a cross-border BD deal, I wonder if you can just walk us through the typical framework, and then what does the timeline typically look like?
I think actually range quite a bit. I heard some crazy story, you know, some really hot, just like buying a house, right? When you buy a house, sometimes you just waive appraisal, right? Because it is really hot, right? You have like 20 offers on the table. So, and sometimes if the house is not very hot, you got only a single buyer and you are MNC, you have a negotiation power, you take your time. So I heard some example, you know, when the company send a non-confidential deck, probably like a 30 or like 40 pages, and then they get a term sheet. That's a little bit extreme. But I also saw, you know, not so competitive assay, you know, the MNC took the chance. They actually sent their Chinese-speaking employee from their New Jersey office to China, check their lab notebook, which is written in Chinese. Or they'll go to their clinical site, you know, all those like CSR were written in Chinese, they translate them, right, and talk to the physician. So this is really wide. But of course, I don't think they're gonna treat China as if you are MNC, you're gonna put a $1 billion, you're gonna cut any corner, right? It's just not gonna fly internally. They have their process, right? You have to have a initial due diligence, right? Your BD discussion, okay, green light. You go to governance, R&D head, everyone get involved, and you do like a full-blown due diligence. I remember son of MNC sent almost 200 people to our data room. That's just still happening. This you know, sometimes also for some China biotech, that's a little bit shock, especially if it's small. You know, once they get this kind of full-blown DD, that's quite a bit of work for them, right?
Are there any Western companies that are better situated, more competent to do the due diligence that's required in China? Are there any counterparties that you say, wow, those guys are really good at finding assets in China?
Definitely there are. You just follow the deal flow, right? So who close more deals? I mean, I can name just like AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca just been in China for such a long time. I think they right now probably have around 14,000 employees in China. They, you know, a lot of the PI run trial for their targeted assay, also run trial for AstraZeneca. So that make their due diligence much easier. A lot of my friends used to work for China traditional China, big pharma, biotech, and know China inside out, right now they work for AstraZeneca as their BD team. So that's very helpful. Similar to Merck, I think Merck probably have around 10,000 employees in China as well. So, especially those like big pharma with a strong operation, have at least a couple $2 billion revenue from China. They are very familiar with what's going on. And yeah, I would say that different data category. But I think everyone realized this is something you cannot miss. So everyone's building BDT in China, actually.
So it sounds like for pharma companies who may have pretty deep Chinese roots may have an advantage here, especially if they have, boots on the ground. Seems like they can find, good assets. But Leon, you also mentioned there may be some newcomers to this Chinese market. Maybe just talk a little bit about what you see in terms of who's coming. And then I think VC players are also looking as well. And then let's say if there's a new US investor or even, US company who's looking for assets in China. I mean, do you have any advice for them when it comes to, where to start and how to find the right programs?
Yeah, first of all, I want to just clarify. I think that all the top 20 big pharma, they're pretty experienced in terms of sourcing Chinese innovation because they have the means, right? They can easily just hire some former, let's say, VC partner or principal from China-based VC firm, or even poach a few BD like colleagues from other big pharma. They pretty much set, right? So that's not that hard for the big guys. For the US VC, I would say that put into roughly speaking 2 categories. Some of them, Eric, you probably remember Carl Gordon said that he was in China way before a lot of people. So he's very, very experienced. Right? So he knows the space very well. He could do even like in China for China deal, all those kind of stuff. And so like blue chip, tier 1 VC, a lot of them in the US, they not only have operation before in China and also have very good working relationship with the tier 1 VC fund in China, like Lily Asia, Chimin, Hongsan, and all those funds. They actually have a regular conversation with their partner in the US. And that's why you saw, for example, like a Foresight was really leading the Cantor Therapeutics launch, right? Because Foresight have a lot of experience in China. I mean, especially T-cell engager space. That's that tier. And then obviously there's a second, I wouldn't say tiers, the second category. They are very established in the US or in Europe, but they're kind of probably didn't pay enough attention to China biotech. And for those, they are trying to, first of all, use a traditional way, just go to JP Morgan, go to Bio, even China Bio, China Healthcare Summit, those kind of a conference to get a note to them. And or they kind of really go to people like us, right? So we are kind of, I would say, in between version of really sourcing China innovation before they really kind of make a full commitment, build a small team or hire a few China experts in-house, right? Because some of the fund, probably their size is not that big. They don't really, China biotech is something still nice to have. It's the must have. It's not primary strategy. So they would go to people like us. There's quite a few organizations like us actually really help those less known VC firm to really source Chinese innovation.
We've also read some reports saying while there are thousands of biotech companies in China, so I guess I'm curious, how do Western partners really sift through so many different programs, and oftentimes they actually go after the same targets? So what is their process to find maybe high quality programs, and what is typically included in the data package? I know it perhaps varies a lot, but maybe just give us some general sense in terms of what level of clinical data or proof of concept a big pharma partner is looking for.
I think big pharma, let's just use big pharma and VC as an example. Their requirement of a data package size and quality is a little bit different. I think big pharma, obviously, they want de-risk as much as possible. Typically, big pharma, have a meaningful, let's say, speed up after saw the clinical data come out. The Cron's a very good example, right? They released a 2 abstract and ASCO. I heard then everything just speed up so much quicker than before. So that's really data driven, as you and I would say as a sales side analyst, right? That's a typical thing. So what happens typically a big pharma actually right now use a major medical conference as a really important way to kind of either identify new China innovation or kind of help them to make a meaningful movement after the data release. That's one. And then in terms of how the business conversation really start or meaningfully move forward, JP Morgan is really important. Actually, you're going to see a lot of China biotech, biopharma business person go there. Bio is one, Bio Europe is another. And if you're willing to travel to China, there's I think Bio China, there's some partner meeting in Singapore. So it also getting very popular. So that's typically the process. Again, just like I mentioned before, the MNC would not treat the China innovation differently. So I would say they probably put a little bit more scrutiny, especially for the people who are not experienced as, let's say, Merck or AstraZeneca. They have been doing this for a long time. They probably still have a little bit doubt, ask a little bit more data. A VC typically a little bit lighter in terms of the requirement of a data package, because the speed is their advantage, right? So sometimes they want to. Sometimes, oftentimes, the assay get interested both from the VC and MNC, big pharma. The VC advantage, they can offer turn sheet right to check faster than MNC. By doing that, that means you're probably gonna skip, the rigor or the duration of due diligence compared to MNC.
Another question I had is what this means for US biotech, right? I mean, if Western biopharma is increasingly tapping Chinese biotech for assets, I mean, what impact do you think it has on the US biotech industry? I mean, do you think it's going to be more of a competitive relationship? Do you think they actually complement each other? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Again, I'm biased. I personally think this is complementary to each other. I don't think that's a threat. Why do I say that? If you look at it, they have a specialized in different thing, right? So China biotech only good on a certain area, certain modality, right? Like I mentioned, their biology is still behind. So if you're talking about first in class, they still have some gap. It's very clear. Another thing is if you look at how big pharma in license asset from China go early now, right? So they go to like a preclinical, let's say PCC, let's say 1 year away from the clinic or phase 1. Big pharma really phase 1. And a VC or biotech in the US could go as early as DC, right? Drug candidate. So I think that's actually good combination of each strength. Still China is very difficult to run pivotal trial. The data package would not be accepted by FDA. So that really kind of have this protection of the US-based biotech or biopharma, because that's another major value creation inflection point. So that kind of stay there. China biotech cannot touch, right? And by doing this, actually, I think the whole R&D cost per assay going to reduce, and the time from you identify a target until you have a drug on the market, which is going to help patient or investor, entrepreneur, going to be faster. So I think it's not a bad thing. That's how I view this. And also, if you look at the US biotech and their investor, US VC fund, they are very, very positive about this. You see like a lot of it, blue chip VC fund very active. One thing is they use the Chinese asset to form new company like Cantor Therapeutics or Calera. Another thing is that they in-license Chinese asset to help their portfolio company. Their portfolio company sometimes, unfortunately, let's say right now, everyone just don't give enough value for platform companies. And if they can in-license a few, a little bit kind of, let's say, preclinical or phase 1 asset from China at a reasonable price, they can have a very compelling story in the capital market in the US. So I say really helpful for the people, investor and the biotech in the US, and also as a whole for the drug development and in the end for the patients.
Well, investors and companies may like a seamless cross-border collaborative effort between US and China, but our government may have a different view, right? So just your thoughts, Leon, on the BioSecure Act and the threat it might pose here.
You definitely know way more than I do, right? So I think the biosecurity is real, and it's just about whether that gonna become more expanded, cover like block more area, to kind of prevent the collaboration of two countries or less. I really don't know. I'm not a policy analyst. I don't really follow that very well, but I think biosecure gonna stay. You can clear say the CRDMO space is decoupled. But in terms of the in license, I personally hope and also I believe would not be cut off Analyst, because really that's jeopardize the investor and the entrepreneur and the big pharma's interest here. Don't forget, the US can only control US investor, US biotech, and US biopharma. European biotech and biopharma, they can do whatever they want, right? Don't forget the largest M&A this year is a GenMab and Profound. GenMab is not a US biotech. And AstraZeneca is very active in terms of in-licensed Chinese asset, and they are not a US pharma. So are Novo Nordisk, like a Genentech, and sorry, not Genentech, Roche and Novartis, right? So they'll keep doing what they are doing. I don't think the biopharma in the US, biotech in the US would be happy if they all of a sudden say you cannot touch China innovation anymore. I don't know whether that makes sense, Eric. What's your view? Actually, I'm curious. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. I mean, this administration is pro-business, and it certainly doesn't want to handicap the U.S. relative to the other countries that you just mentioned, which are obviously going to continue to do business.
Yeah, I agree with it, with Eric. Maybe just last question before we wrap up here, as we are sort of heading into 2025, I wonder if you have any predictions for cross-border BD transactions. I mean, do you think we're going to continue to see this high level of activities, or do you think there may be a potential cool down in any sort of other trends that you think investors should keep an eye on?
Again, this I'm biased, right? I really wish this business continues to have a job. So caveat that. And now let me tell you why I think this analyst is going to continue. They may go up and they may go down, but I think that's going to be sustainable. Why do I say that? Number one, like I said, the Chinese biotech investor made a lot of money this year, this year, right? If you look at the I probably put together probably over 10 billion already. You put all those like upfront, right, near-term milestone together. So those capital, they're not going to return to their LP and do nothing. Some of them are going to go back to the system. This is number one. Number two, I already said talents, right? Pretty much all those companies who sold themselves, the management team are going back to set up a new company, right? So you have talent, you have a capital. And another thing is that the people over there right now become more efficient. Before they mistakenly want to build a biopharma, which is capital inefficient. Now they realize there's a clear way out. And Eric and I both believe, even the US unfortunately blocked the deal making. Europe going to continue doing this. So the whole cycle going to be okay. So they can continue to do this. At least some of them can continue to do this, right? So I think that's going to be sustainable. And then if there's anything, become like a tailwind, let's say, like you said, the new administration going to be pro-business. They realize that's really helpful for the first American patient and then the American investor and entrepreneur, big pharma. They're both going to cool down the temperature. The same with China, right? There's a lot of STEM educated people, highly educated, PhD, master. A lot of them don't have job, to be honest, right? So, help this from policy wide, also very helpful. So I think, I think from like a business sense or from, rational point of view, it's really making sense for the cool down the temperature a little bit and help the patient, help their economy on both sides. That's my personal view.
Great. Okay, I think we covered a lot of ground today in 45 minutes, and Leon, really appreciate your insights, and thank you very much for doing a wonderful job educating us on this very important and dynamic topic. Thanks everyone for listening in. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eric and Lee,
Thank
for
you,
having
Leon.
me. Bye.